This video is brought to you in part by LaLaLe. Now, I could spend hours talking about different saturators, compressors, reverbs, and of all the small nuances that make them unique or beneficial to a project. But one effect that doesn't get the admiration it deserves is gating. See, I didn't even put gating in the title of this video because I knew if I did, a lot of people would think, well, I know what that does, I really don't care. But its benefit to mixing goes well beyond what most people realize. Its most common use is noise reduction, but it also greatly improves phase relations, controls the frequency response, increases the perception of dynamics, and makes all of the other processing you introduce later in a chain sound significantly better. So, let's learn more about the most underrated part of mixing. For part 1, let's talk about improved phase relations. If you've ever mixed a multi-track instrument, you've likely used gating to isolate specific elements. This is especially true with multi-track drums. Now, I have a session here with 17 tracks for one performance, which is about what you can expect from most professionally recorded drums. The primary challenge here is finding how to control them while keeping everything cohesive and in phase. If we zoom in on the waveforms, we'll notice small variations between each track's peaks and troughs. This is to be expected. Each microphone used has a different frequency response, or it's closer to a certain part of the drum set than another. Also, the distance between the microphone and the instrument affects when the sound arrives at the microphone. Since sound travels, it doesn't arrive at the mic instantly. But then there are surprisingly common and extreme examples. You'll notice this crush mic is just about completely out of phase with the room mics, the overheads, the snares, the kicks, and so on. If I amplified this crush track and I didn't fix its phase, it would cause significant phase cancellation and seriously hinder the mixing process. Instead, I'll flip the phase so that it adds to the kick, the snare, and so on, instead of canceling them out. Real quick, a big thank you to LaLaLe for sponsoring this video. Now, I've never promoted AI products on this channel before, but LaLaLe has some genuinely impressive tools that can help you during production and mixing. Just this week, I had a client who had a stereo mix, but no longer had access to the original session. So I directed him to LaLaLe, and with the stem splitter, he was able to cleanly separate the stereo mix into instrument groups, and then fix an issue he had with his vocals level. LaLaLe also offers a voice cleaner, which is perfect for dialogue recorded in less than ideal settings. There's a voice cloner to create a model of your voice, and then they recently added an echo and reverb remover, which in my opinion works incredibly well at recreating a dry vocal when you no longer have control over the processing. Lastly, their prices are based on your use, with one-time charges, so you're not locked into some subscription model. If what I described here can help you with your music production or maybe some content creation, I put a link in the description below. Okay, back to the video. But what does this have to do with gating? Well, you'll notice that in between the transients of a close-mic'd instrument, like a kick drum or a snare, we still have signal. This signal is the entire drum set, albeit quieter than the close-mic'd instrument. More importantly, this signal is often, if not always, conflicting with the phase of the overheads, the room mics, any other microphone that captures the set as a whole, and the bleed from other close-mic'd aspects. So say I've ensured the snare is aligned with the overheads, and now I think, well, the phase is controlled between them, I should be fine. In truth, the phase is aligned for the snare's transient, but it's not aligned for everything else that the mic picked up. So, just like the crush mic that would have caused phase cancellation, I need to fix this issue if I want cohesive and professional sounding drums. This is why gating close-mic'd instruments is crucial if you're mixing a multi-tracked instrument. What you use is up to you, but I like this D-Bleed gate by THR since it's designed with drums in mind. In other words, the transient that's in phase is retained, while everything that's out of phase, the undesired bleed from the rest of the drum set, is kept to a minimum. I'll use each of the 3 algorithms for their related sources, and I could use this analyze feature to see what's recommended before making some adjustments as needed. Or I could just start with a preset and move from there. But with this simple step, one that's often forgotten about, I've just significantly improved the drum sound. Not with saturation, EQ, or reverb, but by keeping the multiple recordings from fighting with one another. So, let's listen to the drums before and after fixing the phase. First, we'll check out the drums as they were recorded. Then I'll introduce some corrections to the phase, like what we discussed with the crush mic. Lastly, I'll introduce THR's D-Bleed plugin. Notice how we're not just isolating instruments, we're greatly improving the phase relationships between the various recordings, which improves the drums as a whole. For part 2, let's talk about gating, the frequency response, and upward processing. Gating is, in many ways, a dynamic equalizer. When a snare hits, particular frequencies are present, and between the hits, different frequencies are present. The actual hit, sustain, and release of a snare may cover the majority of the frequency spectrum, but the gaps in between the hits might have room ambience, electrical noise, and as we covered, other instruments with their unique frequency responses. When this gap is attenuated, or gated, the frequencies that occupy that portion of the snare's recording are attenuated. So say in between snare hits, there's noise from 5 kHz to 12 kHz, and let's say it's peaking at -40 dB. That would have a large impact on the sound of the drums as a whole, and eventually the mix. Gating attenuates that section, meaning that noise no longer contributes to the sound of the drums or the mix. This might seem like a small change, but if it's performed across multiple tracks and multiple instrument types, it makes a huge difference to a mix's frequency response. Next, let's say I plan on compressing this same snare. With the compressor, I reduce the peak level. Then, to make the snare sound full and detailed, I'll apply makeup gain. What we've really accomplished here is we've increased the ratio of lower amplitude signals relative to high amplitude signals. Things that were masked by the snare's peaks are now easier to hear. But what if we forgot to gate the snare? Then, all of those unwanted frequencies, noise, unrelated instrument bleed, and so on, are also amplified. A huge part of mixing and mastering is taking those quiet details and bringing them forward to create a complex sound. When we don't gate, the tracks become noisier and noisier with each additive processor. Now remember what I said in the first portion of this video, that gating reduces phase cancellation. Following the same logic when applying compression and makeup gain, these quieter, out-of-phase elements will become louder. Furthermore, the in-phase aspect, the transient, is reduced. So if we don't gate and then we amplify quieter details via post-compression makeup gain, or maybe an upward processor, we've greatly and negatively affected the phase relations. Now at this point, do you get why I think gating isn't getting the attention it deserves? If it's absent in a mix, it can greatly hinder the quality of a mix and its subsequent master. So let's listen to our drums again. First, I'll include a good deal of upward processing or amplification of quiet details. Notice an excess of noise and how even though they're louder, they sound thin. Then, I'll enable gating before any upward processing. Notice how it greatly improves the perceived loudness, the clarity, and cohesion amongst multiple tracks. For part 3, let's cover increased dynamic perception. This last part is probably the best known or discussed, but its importance is almost always downplayed. Again, let's look at a snare. Let's say the snare peaks at -3 dB. Meanwhile, the noise between the snare hits is -50 dB. The dynamic range in this situation is 47 dB. Now let's say I add a gate and it silences the noise between snare hits. Although there's an argument that we now have an infinite dynamic range, let's say the new dynamic range spans from the threshold of hearing to -3 dB. This would be a dynamic range of about 120 dB, give or take 10 dB. So, with a simple gate, we've increased the dynamic range of this track by about 70 dB. And just like before, this is a cool, albeit small change when taking the full mix into account. But when applied to 10, 20, maybe 30 tracks depending on what's present in the recording, will likely end up increasing the dynamic range of the full mix by about 30 to 40 dB. Now factor in limiting or clipping that occurs during most mastering sessions. The quiet details of the track that we intentionally left ungated, maybe the drum overheads or room mics, are now the noise floor. Instead of having this dense noise floor that's been amplified to -40 or -30 dB, we now have this massive range that creates a wonderful sense of depth. Now for the sake of demonstrating this idea, I'll apply heavy limiting to the drums. At first, I won't apply gating. Notice the lack of depth due to how much we've amplified the noise floor. Then, I'll enable the gates. The perceived loudness remains the same, however, now we have an impressive depth. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us, Sage Audio has been a mastering studio for 2 decades. To work with us, create a free account, upload your mixes, click Request Mastering, and leave any notes you'd like. The master is uploaded to your account when it's done for you to review and download. And if you're not completely happy, you can request a revision. We're not happy with your masters until you are. The standard turnaround is $49 a track, the express turnaround is $59 a track, and it's mastered by actual mastering engineers. If you don't need anything mastered, or you'd prefer to do the mastering yourself, liking this video and subscribing to our channel is a great way to help us out. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.